Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at some Endwalker related news for Final Fantasy XIV. Now, the announcement stream for the expansion has come and gone, and we begin the long dry stretch of waiting until the Digital Fan Fest in May to sink our teeth into some new information. While we speculate and predict what they will talk about, we of course have some things to hold us over, some of those things being interviews about Endwalker itself. I'm going to be pulling from 3 different interviews that I've released in the past week for this video, and covering the highlights of those. One of the interviews in its entirety pretty much, because I loved every question that came from that one. Before we go any further though, please check the description of the video for the sources. Go to those sources, like them, give them views, and of course if someone asks where you heard about this, share those, because that's the original source of all of this information. So the first website's interview we'll be looking at is Fanbyte, and they just had a couple of details that I wanted to share in this video. The first one really being the more exciting of the two. Some of you may recognize the name Natsuka Ishikawa as the main scenario writer for Shadowbringers. Shadowbringers, great story, brought the Heidelin Zodiac arc really forward after years of it sitting in the background, and thus it's only fair that she should also be the main scenario writer for Endwalker. She'll be able to cap off that story that she has really done a lot of work for. She is beloved in the Final Fantasy XIV community for her work with Shadowbringers, and so I'm really looking forward to what she has to do with Endwalker. And honestly, if she goes to write something else that isn't Final Fantasy XIV related after this, I'll be keeping an eye out for anything that she's actually contributing towards with other games, especially single-player games. Kind of hoping she works on 16 a little bit too, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. Now, the Fanbyte interview did have a little bit of an insight into island sanctuaries as well. Really more so that the development team has a lot of Harvest Moon fans. You know, in the last year with the pandemic, these kind of lifestyle games where you're just kind of living off the land or just living slow day to day and just kind of taking everything in at your own pace become a lot more popular. It's been an escape for a lot of people, and so it's kind of fitting that even though it's been over a year since the pandemic started, that Final Fantasy XIV has been working on this style of content. And they were working on it long before we had a pandemic. We actually heard about this a long time ago, and it made its way into being a main feature for the next expansion. A little bit of honesty, I'm a bit of a closet fan of these types of games. Stardew is one that I kind of admire from afar, and I did play a lot of Animal Crossing. My Blue Roses can attest to that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this kind of content is implemented in Final Fantasy XIV, especially with a bunch of the developers being fans of this style of game. Now that's all I really wanted to draw from the Fanbyte interview, though there is a lot more detail in the interview itself. Click the link in the description. The interview I found had the most meat, and the one I've included almost everything from for this video is VG247. Now they cover some fairly hard-hitting questions, Yoshi P even calls them on that, and as a fan of the game, these are the kind of questions that I would certainly be asking given the opportunity. The first one is a little bit more of just a poke of fun of how long we knew we were going to be going to the moon. I mean, a lot of people like to reference the keynote address in 2019 where Yoshi P famously said 7.0. At that point, he actually already knew we were going to the moon, but that's kind of besides the point, as the moon has been a long-running joke in the Final Fantasy XIV community, one Yoshida has most certainly been aware of. He does, of course, note that moons have been important in Final Fantasy XIV, and to some of you, you may not know they were actually always going to be important. You see, obviously Dalamud was used to free Bahamut that was dropped on the planet in the Meteor Project, and that's how we got A Realm Reborn. While that was a great little way to use Dalamud, originally in 1.x, Dalamud was supposed to be its own zone. That's right, we were supposed to go to the moon before A Realm Reborn even released. If those of you familiar with Final Fantasy XI, if this sounds familiar, yes, it was supposed to be a sky or sea-esque area, an end-game zone, where you'd be participating in killing strong, large enemies. Now, Dalamud didn't have that fate in the end, but we do get to go to a moon, obviously, in 6.0, and we're going to be learning a lot about the secrets of the Ancients when we go there. It will be integral to wrapping up the Heidelin and Zodiac arc. So, curious to see how this pans out, and of course they acknowledge that going to the moon has to come with a bunch of Final Fantasy IV references. We've been talking about them this whole time. The fact that we're going from Dark Knight to Paladin, all the minions, and there's bound to be a lot more on top of the ones we already know about. Now, as for the next question, this one is one that's actually in a couple of interviews. When we saw the PS5 announcement, we're like, still no Xbox version, huh? I didn't shed a tear or anything for it. It was kind of to be expected at this point. But VG247 decided, let's ask about that, because it seems like every year we get some news. 2019 and 2020, you and Phil Spencer kept saying that maybe it was going to be happening, and it's like, we get the PS5 announcement, it's just no news on any other platforms. So what's the deal? And Yoshida did give us some answers. There are no obstacles for developing for the Xbox version. They actually did undertake development for it, and Phil has invested in trying to get Final Fantasy XIV on Xbox. So for that, he says they're grateful, and that does confirm the things they've been telling us, that they want to work together, that they can work together, that they've been in talks. And so there was some effort to make an Xbox version. However, the workload and the order of steps involved, according to Yoshida, has largely made it a problem to finish development. They can't say anything. Maybe sometime in the future. They're working on the PS5 version, they're working on the expansion, and they very, very steadily release content. That makes it very difficult for them to actually get the Xbox version out the door. Now, I don't know if those are all the factors, but that is at least what we are being told. So maybe they'll touch upon the Xbox version at a later date, but don't rule it out entirely, because it is still apparently something that is being worked on. Now, moving on to the next question, there's not a whole lot I can offer in regards to this one. This is a music-related question asking about Soken's style and if there will be a theme from Uematsu for this expansion. Now, for those of you who don't know, and it is referenced here, Uematsu recently had some health issues. He stepped away for a little bit, and he started getting back into the groove. And Yoshida says that they'd like to let him prioritize other things while he's had this recent health issue. You know, putting a man under stress to release something for an expansion of this regard, nothing that Uematsu hasn't dealt with before, but given his recent health, that is definitely the right thing to do, and I do appreciate them looking out for that. Not to mention, Soken's great. Soken is his own style. He's not the next Uematsu. He's not anything else but Soken, and we love him for that. The Endwalker theme is already sounding good, and he says that we should wait for the finished trailer to really hear how it's going to turn out. So, looking forward to seeing what they can actually produce with that final song. People are already remixing it, jazz funk. I've seen Alex do the Daft Punk version of it. Had to shout that out. And so I think we're going to be hearing a lot of this theme, and I mean that in a good way, for the very foreseeable future. Now, this one asks very briefly about role quests and job quests. There was a level 80 optional job quest for every job in the previous expansion, and Shadowbringers in our current expansion. At level 90, will there be new job quests, or are those types of job quests just dead in the water? Like, they're not even going to bother with it. Yoshida does confirm that they will have new job quests for existing jobs. That's just, I'd assume, a level 90 quest that catches us up on what's been going on. Nothing too consequential. I could have lived without the level 80 quests, and honestly, as much as I love role quests, I do miss kind of going into these individual stories, even if some of them feel like they've been told to their fullest. Paladin and Warrior in particular, I'm not personally excited to learn any more about, but other jobs like Monk and Dragoon, I do like to learn more about, and so I kind of wish we had maybe a little bit, maybe kind of like the Void Quest. Here and there, they just throw out some lore-related quests for the individual jobs, or maybe, group job quests where, like, different heroes from the different job quests come together. Maybe that'll be part of our role quests going into this next expansion. The melee DPS one having all the job trainers coming together for the melee role quests, and then they'll all be part of some combined story. That'd be pretty cool, but I don't know that it would really hit home as much as the individual job quest ever did. They, of course, are working on job quests for the new jobs as well, and they're obviously working on, level 90 versions of the quests for 5.0. He also makes, it's hard to really decipher this. As for the episode quests for each job that we incorporate in 5.0, we prepared them as sort of a highlight of the job quests from previous expansions. I think that's basically saying that even though they had less levels, they made sure to tell a story across the 10 levels that they initially have to do to catch up to the next expansion, the expansion they're actually releasing in. And then they just get the level 80 quests. So I'd assume that Sage and the new melee DPS will have quests from 70 to 80, and then another quest at 90, similar to what we saw with Gunbreaker and Dancer. So going on to the next one, Deep Dungeons. There wasn't one in Shadowbringers, and they said that they wanted to experiment with other content. Also just that, they're kind of bland after making them a couple of times. But they said when they announced that there wasn't going to be one, there was a lot of disappointment. I was 50-50. It's whatever. I do Deep Dungeons a little bit. I get kind of tired of doing them for leveling, and then I just kind of toss them aside. But there is a subset of the community that likes grouping up and climbing to those high floors, using them for leveling, or soloing. Of course, we have plenty of people in the community who work on those max floor solos. So they are already talking about the next deep dungeon. Now, that's not to say there is a release schedule. That's not to say that they even actually release one. And he definitely makes that clear, especially after the Ultimate debacle. That's really not much of a surprise, which we'll be getting to a little bit later in this video. But at the very least, they are at least planning for a deep dungeon that if they do decide to release one, they'll know where and what the contents of it are. And I'm sure that well before they actually release it, they'll know certainly whether or not they are releasing it and the contents that will be inside. Now, I said I would address it later, but apparently I mean immediately. For Endwalker, are there plans to have 2 or 3 ultimates across the expansion? I'm of the opinion anyone who thought that just because the Dragonsong War was pushed back meant we were going to get 3. I never saw that as a possibility. They always stress how difficult it is to develop ultimates and how much the lead developers don't even like doing it. It's like the most stressful thing for them. Even if they have these like fantasies and these ideas and they love to see people enjoy it, the fear and the anxiety of delivering is something they've all said they don't really like doing all that much. Savage and Extreme, for most of them, is more along the lines of what they look to develop for. Now, that being said, because of what was announced, with no more expansions and Shadowbringers, are any ideas being saved for the final expansion in the Scion storyline? So, Yoshida says wants to have 2 ultimates in Endwalker. That's no surprise. And they need to review the schedule for the 6.x series. It's exactly as I mentioned prior, but I really wanted to release Dragonsong War Ultimate in 5.55. Ultimate Trials don't really exert much impact on the expansion or characters because there's a strong emphasis on it being a what-if scenario. However, the reason for the postponement, and they said this during the live letter, as he says right here, it was going to impact the development of Endwalker if they tried to put too much into getting it out in patch 5.55, largely because of the restrictions and the issues that they ran into developing under COVID-19's influence. So they apologize. They say, please keep your excitement for 6.1. And if I can add a little tidbit here, I think we still will get to an Endwalker. I'm going to keep that as my baseline. Like I said, 3 was never really a possibility. But of course, the fear is that we only get 1 again. Now, feedback, the reason why Dragonsong War was even put in 5.5 initially is because of the feedback from people who did the ultimates in Stormblood. We didn't have an ultimate in 4.5, and a lot of the people in that circle, the people who actually do the content, said it would be great if we had a new ultimate in the 0.5 part of the series, because it would allow us to generate excitement and hype before the next expansion with a really high tier encounter. And I agree with that assessment. I even gave that as my feedback. However, if it's going to come down to it potentially getting in the way of expansion development because it's so close in proximity, I'd rather scrap that altogether, because having 2 ultimates, at least for me, is more important than trying to have it at the right time. And if anything happens, if there were another pandemic or another major thing that got in the way of development, then it would happen again. And I think that it's safer to play it in the 0.1, 0.3 patches in the future, as opposed to going for the 0.5 patch ultimate. Now, that could be too stressful on the development team. I don't know, but I'm sure they will let us know if that is indeed the case. But that is my thoughts on the situation, and a change I hoped they make going into Endwalker to release in 0.1 and 0.3. Shadowbringers brought us 2 new races, and they were gender locked. And there's also some armor issues with those jobs. And Yoshida says, there's a very direct question. Are there going to be anything new for character creations that introduce anything new, or gender options, or additional gender options, or introduction of armor which isn't locked to certain genders or races? He's explained previously, but it's very stressful to do new races. And in the case of Viera and Hrothgar, they even said doing the other genders was going to be very, very difficult. It's because of the way the armor is kitted around that doing it on the server side and sending it to the client is a lot more difficult. For those of you who be like, on the client, I just stretch it this way and that. It's a lot different when you're sending the data from the centralized server into the client versus just modifying it in the client. So they don't want to say much of anything else in regards to any other elements that they could be spoiling in terms of armor, like headgear working properly for the new races that we got in Shadowbringers. They wouldn't comment on any of that. I personally think that maybe they'll expand the options, but I'm willing to bet that's even by the time Endwalker's releases, there's still not an option for every single headpiece for Hrothgar. Yeah, I'm a pessimist. I'm sorry. I just don't think that's going to be the case. You know what I didn't even realize? I went right from VG 247 to the trusted reviews, and I didn't even realize it because I was just so into the ultimate question. So these last two questions were from trusted reviews, cited in the description of the video, and these are two very, very direct, important questions to have asked. So those are all the questions I really wanted to highlight from the interviews that have been coming out recently. I'm sure there will be more that I wish to highlight here on the channel. So if you see any video that's regarding news, just remember to check the description, because I very much appreciate the work that these websites are doing with their interviews and with the information that they are providing to us as a community. But with that, that's going to be a wrap. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned. We'll be doing a ton of Endwalkers related stuff throughout the months as we wait for Endwalkers itself and for any additional information in the form of a digital fan fest. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, take care.